Very good. We are going to go to the phones. Everything is seems to be groovy. Let's go to Sean in Pensacola, Florida, listening on FM 103.3. Hi, Sean.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing great. What's your question?
My question is, because you hear from different people what the stance is, but I was wondering if there is an official stance from the Catholic Church on evolution or common descent. I was wondering what, I guess you personally, if you can't speak for the whole Catholic Church, what your stance was on it.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, the presumption of the Church and the teaching of the Church, and if you read the Catechism carefully with this in mind, it speaks of two historical figures who are our parents. Why would it do that? One is the unity of the whole human race on a natural level. If there is multiple descent of human beings from different origins and somehow we all co-evolved or something like that, there is no unity of the human race. You can argue, as some have done historically, for instance, that Jews and Gentiles are different creatures, that blacks and whites are different species or races, that the one group is inferior and another group is superior. So the unity of the human race on simply a sociological level is extremely important. And the existence of two parents shows that that is the case. Now, there are sort of anecdotal things that support that in genetics, the idea that all men show a common descent from genetically from one individual in the past, that they go further back. They see a sort of a narrowing of the Y chromosome that points to, at a certain point in time, one individual who was the source of that Y. And likewise in the women, when they check the mitochondrial DNA, the little factory inside every one of our cells that churns out proteins and so on, they go back and they euphemistically speak of mitochondrial Eve, who was the source of that. So there is sort of this sense that there is something connecting all of us biologically. Now, what the Church has said, I think what we probably want to do is to save for the next after the break, because
Sounds
it's
good.
important to talk about.
Sean, hang in there. We're going to hold you over the break. You're listening to Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Don't go away. We're going to get to part 2 of that question from Sean in Pensacola regarding evolution.
Yeah, that's it's an important question, because obviously we hear so much about that, and it's assumed today in the general populace. Maybe not so much in the United States, where a lot of evangelicals and others don't necessarily buy into that, or Catholics for that matter. But what the Church has said is rather limited. First of all, we take it on a point of faith that we are united, and therefore that there are two individuals from whom all the human race came. We also have this not just in the book of Genesis, and I gave a sort of natural evidence for that, but in the book not only in the book of Genesis, but in the fact that both in the New Testament and in the Fathers of the Church, Christ is said to be the new Adam. That we all lost grace in the first Adam, and through Christ we are redeemed. Again, there is a unity of the human race. How could Christ redeem mankind, redeem human nature, unless it came out of a single font? This is why Pius XII, without dogmatically defining it, but certainly teaching what had been taught for centuries, asserted that it would be hard to see how the opinion that there are multiple origins of human beings, Pelagianism or polygenism, is compatible with what God has revealed. Now, he didn't go so far as to say that it might not be reconciled. His language was carefully chosen, but it certainly raises the bar on the evidence necessary to convince the Church that we had origins in several places and not simply from the Adam and Eve described in the Bible. And so it seems unlikely. Science will never get so exact that it can necessarily rule out rule out the church's opinion. I don't believe. I think everything actually points to it. If you do any genealogical studies today, for example, it's interesting that their analysis of these two genetic features, the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial DNA, which we only get from our mother, because we get all of our cell matter from our mother. The husband makes a very small contribution to human life, just completing the genome, and that's about it. So we get all of that from our mother, and everything shows a common coming out of the northwestern Africa, which may have been united, which was united at some point in time with southwestern Asia in the area of the Middle East. All those geological fracture zones are present there to this day. You see them in the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, and in the Dead Sea, which is 1,200 feet below sea level. So some cataclysm happened in the past, and everything points to coming out of one place in that part of the world, and that everybody came from there and migrated elsewhere. This is where the bulk of the genetic evidence is going, and it's certainly compatible with what the church teaches. So I see it highly unlikely that science is leading in the direction of affirming multiple origins.
No.
If it did, then it would be answered. The church would have to make that reconciliation. Truth cannot be divided, as it were. You can't have one truth in the natural sciences and another in philosophy and theology.
Right.
So that's the state of it. The church has said very limited. The presumption is clearly to Prince Adam and Eve, etc., and that that it will. I think it will stay that way, regardless of that. Well, science will not be able to undermine that.
Sean, that's an awful lot to process. Was any of that helpful for you?
Well, I'm glad to hear that at least you're open to the evidence when you made reference to the mitochondrial Eve, which is somewhat dated around 200,000 years ago. It leads me to assume that you don't have a stance on the young Earth creation.
Well, I think the scientific evidence is against it, frankly. Now, that's another matter.
It is indeed.
Yeah,
I think it's only a 1-hour show. So
yeah, and Pius XII said in the 1950s, applauded the discoveries of astronomers that showed the great size and age of the universe, because he actually said that this shows the glory of God, and I think that's true. So I know there are people in the church who affirm a young Earth and all of that. It is certainly not the opinion of Catholic theologians, and does not seem to be the opinion of the popes.
Sean, thank you so much for your call. Our number is 1-800-585-9396, and I'll tell you, Colin, if we're ever playing Scrabble and you lay down mitochondrial, I'm probably going to have a heart attack. I'm just telling you now so that you'll be ready. Let's move on to Paul in Lexington, Kentucky, listening online on EWTN.com. Hi, Paul.